The galaxy is vast, cold, indifferent. It hums with the silent song of dead stars and the slow, grinding birth of new ones. Civilizations rise like sparks in the endless dark, flare bright with ambition, and are snuffed out just as quickly, often by forces they never saw coming. For millennia, the dominant powers of the Orion Arm operated under a simple, brutal axiom. Strength is order. Order is survival. They called themselves the Concordance of Ascendant Races, a coalition of sleek, multi-limbed Cathar, crystalline Velnin and the insectoid hive mind of the Zorathi. They patrolled the void, enforcing their version of peace, a peace built on submission, resource extraction, and the quiet erasure of anything deemed unstable. And then they found Sol. Earth wasn't on any star charts. It was a backwater anomaly, a pale blue dot orbiting an unremarkable G-type star, hidden behind a nebula so dense it scattered long-range sensors like dust in a hurricane. When the Cathar scout vessel Whisper of Finality finally pierced the veil, its crew expected ruins, or silence. What they found was noise, constant, chaotic, biological noise. A planet teeming with life so dense, so aggressive, so unpredictably violent it defied their most sophisticated ecological models. Predators that hunted in coordinated packs across continents. Microbes that could dissolve durasteel in hours. Storms that ripped mountains apart, oceans that boiled with unseen leviathans. And at the heart of it all, humans. The Concordant scientists were fascinated. Horrified. They dubbed Sola a death world, a rare, almost mythical classification for a planet whose very biosphere was lethally hostile to non-native life. Humans, they concluded, were a fluke, a species forged in fire, hardened by constant brutal struggle, resilient, undoubtedly, but ultimately primitive, chaotic, a threat to galactic stability. Their technology was crude, chemical rockets, primitive energy weapons, networks vulnerable to a single well-placed EMP, their societies fractured by ancient hatreds and fleeting alliances. They were in the cold calculus of the Concordance, expendable, a resource to be harvested then contained, or cleansed. The cleansing began not with a declaration of war but with a stabilization protocol. Concordance fleets descended like silent, silver clouds. Orbital platforms rained down precision strikes, not on cities, but on infrastructure. Power grids, communication hubs, orbital defenses. They sought to cripple, not obliterate. To demonstrate overwhelming superiority and force immediate, unconditional surrender. They expected panic, capitulation. Instead, they found defiance. Humanity didn't break. It adapted. In the ruins of shattered cities, in the irradiated forests, in the flooded coastlines, humans fought back with a ferocity that bordered on the insane. They used the death world itself as a weapon, luring Cathar patrols into nests of acid-spitting flora, rigging abandoned fusion plants to explode with the force of small suns, turning their own plague-ravaged bodies into biological bombs against the fastidious Zorathi. They were messy, illogical. They sacrificed everything for nothing or for everything, depending on the moment. They were, in the words of a shaken Cathar field commander, a species that mistakes extinction for an invitation to dance. Years bled into decades. The stabilization protocol became the Sol War. The Concordance poured resources into the quagmire, their sleek warships scarred by jury-rigged human missiles and corrosive spores. They learned to fear the silence before a human ambush, the way human eyes held not just hatred but a terrifying, unquenchable will. And they learned the name whispered in the ruins, a name that became a curse on Cathar lips and a desperate prayer on human ones. Commander Anya Rostova. On the shattered continent once called Europe, beneath the skeletal remains of a city that had dared to call itself Paris, Anya Rostova moved like a ghost through the perpetual twilight of ash and smoke. Her armor, a patchwork of scavenged Cathar plating, human ballistic weave and crude ceramic plates, was scarred and stained, but it held. Her face beneath the cracked visor of her helmet was gaunt, etched with lines deeper than her 35 years should allow, but her eyes burned with a cold, focused fire. Not the wild rage of the early days, but something sharper, deadlier, calculated. She crouched behind a collapsed ferrocrete slab, the acrid tang of ozone and decay thick in the air. Below, in the cratered plaza that had once been Place de la Concorde, a Cathar patrol moved with their usual unnerving precision. 3 of them, their multi-jointed limbs clicking softly against the rubble, their obsidian carapaces gleaming dully under the weak filtered sunlight. Their sensory stalks swiveled constantly, tasting the air for human pheromones, thermal signatures, the faintest electromagnetic wisp. They were searching for her, for the last known command node of the European resistance. Anya's fingers tightened on the grip of her rifle, a monstrous hybrid thing, its stock carved from the bone of some long-dead Deathworld beast, its barrel grafted onto the receiver of a salvaged Cathar pulse rifle. It whined softly as it charged, the sound almost lost in the groan of shifting ruins. She didn't breathe, she listened, to the skittering of radrats in the rubble, to the distant mournful howl of a wind tearing through skeletal skyscrapers, to the rhythmic, almost hypnotic click-click-click of the Cathar patrol. They're nervous, she thought. Good. Her mind flashed back, not to the glory days of the resistance. There had been no glory, only survival, but to the bunker. The smell of stale air, recycled too many times, the flickering emergency lights casting long, dancing shadows, the faces of her squad, haggard but determined, and then, the betrayal. The sudden, blinding flash of internal security protocols overriding their own comms. The Cathar dropships descending through their supposedly hidden shield generator, their landing struts crushing the very roof they'd thought was sanctuary. The scream, the wet tearing sounds of Cathar claws meeting human flesh. The sight of young Lieutenant Aris, barely 19, trying to shield a wounded comrade with his own body only to be impaled on a Cathar energy pike, his eyes wide with disbelief, not pain. They knew. The thought was a shard of ice in her gut, someone told them. The patrol below paused. One Cathar, slightly larger than the others, its carapace etched with intricate silver sigils denoting command, raised a limb. Its sensory stalk stiffened, pointing directly towards Anya's hiding place. Impossible. She'd masked her heat signature with thermal blankets scavenged from a downed Zorathi drone. She'd coated her armor in mud laced with local spores that scrambled bioscanners. Had she moved? Breathed too loud. The lead Cathar emitted a series of sharp, chittering clicks. The other 2 instantly fanned out, their weapons elegant, needle-thin projectors humming with contained plasma swiveling towards the slab. Anya's heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic drumbeat against the suffocating silence. Now or never. She didn't hesitate. She rolled out from cover, the heavy rifle already spitting bolts of superheated plasma. The first shot caught the lead Cathar square in its primary sensory cluster. It shrieked, a sound like shattering glass, and stumbled back, black ether spraying from the wound. The second Cathar returned fire, bolts of searing energy sizzling past Anya's head, vaporizing chunks of ferrocrete. She dove behind another pile of rubble, the impact shaking the ground. Click, click, click. Closer now. They were flanking her. She could hear the scrape of their claws on stone, smell the ozone tang of their weapons charging. She was pinned, outgunned, outnumbered. Again. A memory surfaced, unbidden. Her father, years before the war, teaching her to track wolves in the Siberian taiga. The wolf doesn't fight the bear, Anya, he'd said, his voice rough but calm. It waits, it learns the bear's path, then it cuts the tendons in its sleep. She wasn't a wolf, she was the bear now, and the Cathar were the hunters. She slapped a crude grenade, a sphere of packed thermite and shrapnel wrapped in scavenged wiring, onto the ground beside her, pulled the pin, rolled it under the slab towards the approaching Cathar. Then she ran, not away from the plaza, but towards the nearest skeletal building, a pre-war museum. She scaled the crumbling facade with desperate speed, fingers finding purchase in cracks and rebar, ignoring the burning ache in her muscles. Behind her, the thermite grenade detonated with a silent, white-hot fury. The concussive blast wasn't loud, but the heat wave was immense, melting stone and metal alike. She heard the agonized shrieks of the Cathar caught in the inferno. She didn't look back. She reached a shattered window on the 3rd floor, tumbled through and collapsed onto the dusty floor, gasping for air that tasted of ash and burnt plastic. Silence. Then the heavy, deliberate thud 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 of a single cutter ascending the building after her. The lead one. The one with the sigils. It hadn't been caught in the blast. It was hunting her personally. Anya pushed herself up, her rifle heavy in her hands. She moved through the skeletal remains of exhibits. A fossilized dinosaur skeleton, its bones bleached white. A shattered display case holding rusted medieval armor. She found a vantage point overlooking the grand staircase. She waited. The Kethor appeared at the top of the stairs. It was larger than she remembered, its movements deliberate, almost weary. Its damaged sensory cluster oozed black fluid, but its remaining stalks fixed on her with unnerving focus. It didn't raise its weapon immediately. Instead, it made a series of low, guttural clicks, interspersed with a strange, almost melodic hum. Not a threat. An inquiry. Anya's finger tightened on the trigger. Shoot it. End it. But something in its posture, the slight tilt of its head, the way it held its weapon low, it wasn't the mindless aggression she was used to. It was assessing, calculating. Like, spit a human, Anya rasped, her voice raw from disuse and smoke. Or die. The Kethor tilted its head further. A series of clicks, then a synthesized voice, rough and metallic, emanated from a grill on its carapace. It spoke standard, the galactic lingua franca, but with a heavy guttural accent. You are Rostova, the ghost of Saul. Anya didn't lower her rifle. And you're trespassing on a graveyard. State your purpose, insect. The Kethor ignored the insult. It took a slow step forward. I am Kalan Vex, Field Commander, 7th Stabilization Fleet. It paused, its remaining sensory stalks seeming to study her face. Your tactics, they are inefficient, wasteful. You sacrifice your own for minimal gain. Why? Why? Anya laughed. A harsh, broken sound. You burn our cities. You slaughter our children. You call it stabilization? You think we fight for gain? We fight because you left us nothing else. Because breathing your poisoned air is a victory. Because every Kethor I kill is one less monster defiling this world. Kalarnvax was silent for a long moment. The only sound was the wind whistling through the broken windows. Then it did something utterly unexpected. It lowered its weapon completely, letting it hang loosely at its side. The stabilization protocol is flawed, it stated, the synthesized voice flat, devoid of inflection, yet the words themselves were seismic. The cost is unacceptable. For both sides. Anya stared, disbelief warring with suspicion. Was this a trick? A new form of psychological warfare? Unacceptable? You started this war. You called us Deathworld vermin. We misjudged, Kalarnvex admitted, the words seeming to cost it effort. We saw only chaos. We did not see resilience. We did not see strategy in the chaos. It took another step closer. There is a faction within the Concordance. They believe Saul must be sterilized completely to prevent the Deathworld contagion from spreading. Ice flooded Anya's veins. Sterilization, total annihilation, not just occupation but erasure. When? She whispered. Soon, Kalarnvex replied. The final fleet assembles at the Helios shipyards. Beyond the Oort cloud, it extended a clawed limb, not threateningly but offering. In its grasp was a small crystalline data shard, glowing faintly blue. This contains schematics, weaknesses, fleet, deployment schedules. A chance for your people. Anya's mind reeled. Redemption? From a Kethor. It was absurd. Impossible. And yet, the data shard. The sheer suicidal risk this creature was taking. Why? What did it gain? Why? She demanded, her voice trembling with a mix of rage and desperate hope. Why help us? After everything? Kalarnvex's sensory stalks drooped slightly. I commanded the patrol at the Siberian bunker complex Theta 7, it said, the synthesized voice dropping to a near whisper. The one that fell because of the traitor. Anya froze. The Theta 7. Her bunker. Eris. The betrayal. Her blood turned to fire. You were there. I gave the order, Collard and Vex stated. The words heavy with a burden Anya couldn't fathom. I believed the intelligence. I believed the intelligence. I believed it was necessary. It looked directly at her, its remaining eye cluster seeming to hold a depth of sorrow that transcended species. I did not know about the children, the medics, the surrender protocols you had initiated that day. It paused, the silence thick with unspoken horror. I have sought a way to atone. This is... Anya's finger was white-knuckled on the trigger. Every instinct screamed to shoot, to erase this monster who had ordered the death of her friends, her family in arms, to reject this poisoned gift. But the image of the final fleet of Earth reduced to sterile cinders. It was a weight heavier than vengeance. She looked from the data shard to Collard Vex's scarred carapace, then back to the shard, the symbol of hope offered by the architect of her deepest pain. She didn't ask for redemption. She saw only the cold, hard calculus of survival, and the chance for revenge on a scale that would shake the stars. Slowly, deliberately, she lowered her rifle just enough to reach out. Her gloved hand closed around the cool crystal. The moment her fingers touched it, Collard's head snapped up, its sensory stalks rigid. A high-pitched whine, almost inaudible, filled the air. Transponder, Collard Vex hissed, the synthesized voice laced with sudden panic. They've traced my comm signature. They know I'm here. They know I... The words were cut off by a blinding flash of light and a deafening crack that shattered the remaining winans. A high-velocity Kether sniper round, fired from a distant rooftop, punched through Collard Vex's carapace just below its primary sensory cluster. The field commander staggered, ether erupting in a black geyser, then collapsed to its knees, then onto its side, limbs twitching spasmodically. Anya dove for cover behind the dinosaur's skeleton, the data shard clutched tight against her chest. More shots rang out, pocking the stone around her. She scrambled deeper into the ruined museum, the Collard's final choked gurgle echoing in her ears. She didn't look back. She ran, the weight of the crystal burning in her hand, the ghost of a Cathar's apology and the promise of ultimate revenge warring in her soul. The hunt was over. The real war was about to begin. The data shard burned a hole in Anya's pocket as she navigated the labyrinthine ruins beneath what was left of London. The tunnels were a warren of collapsed subway lines, forgotten utility conduits, and resistance bolt holes, smelling of damp concrete, ozone and the ever-present tang of human desperation. She moved like a shadow, her senses hyper-alert, expecting Cathar hunters around every corner. But the only pursuers were the ghosts of Theta 7 and the chilling certainty that Collard Vex's death hadn't been random. Someone knew he'd made contact. Someone within the Concordance or within the Resistance itself. She finally reached the command center. A reinforced chamber deep beneath the Thames, lit by flickering bioluminescent fungi cultivated on nutrient paste. The air hummed with the low thrum of jury-rigged generators and the tense silence of survivors. Faces turned towards her as she entered, etched with exhaustion and the hollow-eyed hope that only the truly broken can muster. Among them stood Elias Vance, the de facto leader of the European resistance since the fall of Geneva Command. His face was a roadmap of old scars and newer grief, his eyes sharp as flint. "Rostova," he rasped, his voice gravelly. "Report. And where's the Cathar patrol?" "Neutralized," Anya said flatly, stepping into the dim light. She didn't mention Collard Vex's death. Not yet. But we have bigger problems. She held up the data shard. Intel. From a source inside the Concordance. A murmur rippled through the room. Hope, fragile and dangerous. Vance's eyes narrowed, instantly suspicious. A source? After Theta 7? After the betrayal? "Anya, you know as well as I do. Trust is a luxury we buried with Eris." "This isn't about trust, Elias," Anya snapped, her voice cracking with the strain of holding back the truth. "It's about survival. The Concordance is planning total sterilization. They're assembling a final fleet at Helios shipyards. This," she tapped the shard, "gives us a shot at stopping it." Vance studied her, his gaze piercing. He saw the haunted look in her eyes, the tension in her jaw that went beyond mere fatigue. He saw the ghost of Theta 7 clinging to her. And this source? What's their price? What do they want? Anya hesitated. The truth, that it was the Kithar who ordered Theta 7's destruction. Offering redemption would shatter what little unity remained. It would confirm every paranoid fear, every whispered accusation of collaborators in their midst. It would turn them against her. They want the same thing we do, she lied, the words ash in her mouth. An end to the war, on our terms. Vance didn't look convinced, but the sheer terrifying implication of sterilization overrode his suspicion. Fine, decrypt it. Fast. We need options, Anya, not miracles. The decryption took hours, fueled by stale nutrient paste and bitter coffee brewed from roasted roots. The data unfolded like a nightmare made manifest. Schematics of the Helios shipyards, a colossal orbital complex built around a captured asteroid bristling with defenses, fleet compositions, hundreds of Kikathar dreadnoughts, Sarathi swarm carriers, Velm crystalline fortresses, deployment timetables, weak points in the shipyard's shield harmonics, and a chilling addendum, Project Scorched Cradle. The sterilization protocol. Not just orbital bombardment, but the deployment of tailored nanites designed to unravel Earth's biosphere at a molecular level, rendering it permanently sterile, a slow, silent death for the death world. As Anya studied the schematics, a cold dread settled over her. The weak point, the shield harmonic resonance frequency, was real, exploitable, but the window was narrow. A single, perfectly timed strike by a small, fast ship could collapse the entire shield grid for precisely 17.3 seconds, long enough for a follow-up strike if they had the firepower, which they didn't. Humanity's remaining fleet was scattered, crippled, hiding in the asteroid belts or the outer system. They had maybe a dozen functional capital ships left, not enough to crack Helios, even with the shield down. Unless they had something else. Something the Concordance feared more than human warships. Her eyes fell on a secondary file within the shard, labeled with Keelarn Vex's personal encryption sigil. With trembling fingers she accessed it. It wasn't tactical data. It was a confession. A detailed log of Theta 7, the intelligence source, a human collaborator codenamed Mole, the intercepted comms showing Vance's desperate, genuine attempts to negotiate a local ceasefire that day. Keelarn Vex's dawning horror as he realized the intelligence was false, fed to him by a rival Concordance faction, eager to prove the Deathworlders were irredeemable savages. His futile attempts to call off the strike, overruled by High Command. His guilt, his search for redemption, his belief that Anya Rostova, the ghost of Saul, was the only one who could stop the coming genocide. And then, the name. The name of the Mole. Buried deep in the encrypted logs, cross-referenced with Resistance comms intercepts Keelarn Vex had secretly obtained. Nua's blood ran cold. She stared at the screen, the name burning into her retinas. Elias Vance. It couldn't be. It wasn't possible. Vance, the grizzled leader who'd lost his entire family in the first orbital strikes. Vance, who'd carried wounded children through Cathar fire. Vance, who'd been her mentor, her anchor after Theta 7. The man who'd just questioned her trust. But the evidence was irrefutable. Encrypted data packets sent from Vance's personal command terminal in the days leading up to Theta 7. Payments routed through black market channels to a Cathar intelligence broker. Coordinates. Surrender protocol, all designed to make the Resistance bunker look like a trap, justifying the Cathar assault. The betrayal wasn't just a leak. It was a setup, orchestrated by the man she trusted most. To what end? Power? Survival? Or something darker? The weight of it crushed her. Theta 7. Eris. All of them, sacrificed not by Cathar cruelty alone, but by human treachery. By the man standing guard outside this very room. Light years away, aboard the Cathar command vessel Sovereign Edict, High Arbiter Zorvin surveyed the Helios shipyards through the panoramic viewport. The complex was a jewel of Concordance engineering, a testament to their power and order. Soon it would birth the fleet that would finally impose true stability on the chaotic anomaly of Sol permanently. Zorvan's multifaceted eyes, cold and calculating, reflected the cold fire of distant stars. He was old, his carapace deeply scarred by centuries of enforcing the Concordance's will. He had seen countless rebellions crushed, countless unstable systems brought to heel. Sol was merely the latest, most irritating example. The Deathworlder's resilience was an affront to logic, a cancer that needed excising. A subordinate, a young Cathar with pristine carapace, approached, clicking deferentially. Arbiter, final confirmation on Project Scorched Cradle. Nanite dispersal units are loaded. Fleet readiness at 9. Good, Zoras. Clicked, his voice a dry rasp. The anomaly ends. Order is restored. He paused, his sensory stalks twitching. And the traitor, Kalarn Vex, eliminated. Arbiter, as anticipated. His sentimentality made him predictable. A weakness. Zorvan's mandibles clicked in satisfaction. Sentiment is the first symptom of decay. It clouds judgment, leads to errors like Theta 7. He turned fully to the young Cathar. Ensure the human collaborator is paid. Handsomely. His information was invaluable. Once Scorched Cradle is complete, eliminate him. Loose ends are untidy. The young Cathar bowed. It shall be done, Arbiter. Zorvan turned back to the viewport, watching the final dreadnought slide into formation. Sword was a lesson, a brutal, necessary lesson for the galaxy. Chaos, no matter how resilient, always yields to order. Always. Back in the London bunker, Anya sat in the dim light, the decrypted name, Elias Vance, burning in her mind like a brand. She couldn't confront him. Not yet. If he was the mole, he'd kill her. Or worse, alert his Cathar handlers. She needed proof. Irrefutable proof. And she needed a plan. The Helios strike was still possible. But not with human ships. They needed something the Concordance feared. Something they underestimated. They needed the death world itself. An idea, insane and terrifying, began to form. The Concordance saw Earth's biosphere as a weapon against them. What if humanity could weaponize it for them? On a scale they couldn't imagine? The schematics mentioned the shield harmonic weakness. What if they didn't send a ship? What if they sent a seed? She remembered the deep-core drilling platforms humanity had used before the war, tapping geothermal energy from the planet's molten heart. What if they modified one, not to drill but to launch, to fire a projectile not of metal but of concentrated, hyper-aggressive Earth biomass, engineered spores, viral vectors, predatory microfauna tuned to the specific harmonic frequency of the Helios shields. A biological torpedo that wouldn't just breach the shields but infect the shipyard, turning the Concordance's own sterile environment against them. A true death world plague. It was madness. The energy requirements were astronomical. The engineering challenges near impossible. But it was the only shot they had, and it required absolute secrecy. Especially from a traitor in their midst. She spent the next days working feverishly, drafting schematics on scavenged datapads, consulting the few surviving bioengineers in the bunker. She avoided Vance, speaking only in terse, necessary reports. She saw the suspicion in his eyes deepen, the way his hand lingered near his sidearm when she entered a room. He knew she knew something. The tension was a live wire. Finally, the plan was ready, codenamed Gaia's Fist. They would retrofit the deepest, most intact geothermal platform they could find. Deep Core Station Omega, buried under the Antarctic ice sheet. It was risky, exposed, but its depth and power output were unmatched. Anya presented the plan to the Resistance Council, omitting the true nature of the payload, calling it a resonance disruptor. Vance listened, his face unreadable. When she finished, he leaned forward, his voice low and dangerous. It's a gamble, Anya. A huge one. We divert all remaining resources to this fist. While the Kithar tighten the noose. What if it fails? It won't fail, Anya stated, meeting his gaze squarely, her voice steady despite the storm inside. Because we have no other choice. Because Earth is the weapon. We just have to aim it. Vance held her stare for a long moment. Then slowly he nodded. Do it. But Rostova? He leaned closer, his breath smelling of stale coffee and something metallic. If this is another one of your reckless schemes, if you get more good people killed chasing ghosts. He didn't finish the threat. He didn't need to. The mobilization began. Scavenged parts were hauled across frozen wastes. Engineers worked around the clock in the sub-zero depths of Omega Station. Anya oversaw it all, her eyes constantly scanning the shadows, watching Vance. She saw him slip away during a shift change, his comms unit active. She saw the subtle tension in his shoulders when Cathar patrol patterns shifted, coinciding suspiciously with their supply runs. The proof was mounting. But she needed the final piece. The payment confirmation. The direct. One night, while Vance was supposedly on perimeter watch, Anya used her override codes, gleaned from Kalarn Vex's data to access the deepest, most secure layer of his personal terminal. Buried beneath layers of encryption, she found it a final transaction log, a massive credit transfer from a Kalarn shell corporation. Tom stamped it after Theta 7, and a single chilling message attached: ensure Rostova's cooperation. Eliminate if necessary. Proceed with Scorched Cradle. Signed with Zorvan's personal sigil. The devastation hit her like a physical blow. It wasn't just about Theta 7. Vance was actively facilitating the genocide. He'd sold them out for credits, for survival, for whatever twisted reason lived in his broken heart. He was the cancer with. She stumbled back from the terminal, bile rising in her throat. The faces of Theta 7 flashed before her eyes. Eris's wide, trusting eyes, the medics singing lullabies to terrified children in the bunker's last moments, all sacrificed so Vance could buy himself a few more months, or a seat at the Concordance's table. She didn't cry. The tears had dried up years ago. Instead, a cold, pure fury ignited within her, colder and sharper than anything she'd felt before. It wasn't just about stopping Helios anymore. It was about justice, about making the traitor pay. She found Vance on the observation deck overlooking the ice fields, the aurora australis painting the sky in ghostly greens and purples. He was silhouetted against the light, a lonely figure. "Elias," she said, her voice devoid of emotion. He turned, his hand instinctively going to his sidearm. "Anya, shouldn't you be overseeing the final calibrations?" "I found your payment," she stated flatly. "From Zorvan. For Theta 7. For selling us out." Vance's face didn't change. No surprise. No shame. Just a weary resignation. "So you know," he sighed. A long, slow exhalation that fogged in the cold air. "I thought you might figure it out. You always were too sharp for your own good." "Why?" Anya demanded, the words raw. "Why Eris? Why the children? Why?" "Because we were losing." "Anya," Vance exploded, his voice cracking with sudden desperate intensity. "Don't you see? The Concordance wasn't going to stop. They were going to grind us into dust. Theta 7. It was a chance. A real chance. I fed them false intel about a major weapons cache. Made it look like we were planning a massive counteroffensive from the bunker. I thought, if they hit that hard it would force them to the table. Show them the cost was too high, but..." His voice dropped, filled with a bitterness that curdled the air. "They didn't care about the cost. They just saw an opportunity to wipe out a command node. And Zorvan, he saw an opportunity to discredit the moderates like Kalarn Vex. He promised me a place, safe place, for the survivors, a reservation on a quiet moon. Order, peace." He looked at her, his eyes pleading now. "Isn't that worth it? Isn't peace worth the price? Peace bought with the blood of children isn't peace." "Elias," Anya whispered, her voice trembling with rage. "It's slavery. And you're not a savior. You're just another butcher wearing a different uniform." She raised her sidearm, the barrel steady. "Project Scorched Cradle is still coming. You're still helping them." Vance's hand moved towards his own weapon, but Anya was faster. She fired. Not to kill. A stun round, set to maximum. It hit him square in the chest. He convulsed, eyes wide with shock and betrayal, then collapsed onto the icy deck, unconscious. Anya stood over him, the aurora casting long, dancing shadows. She didn't feel triumph. Only a hollow, aching void where trust used to be. She keyed her comm. Security. Observation deck. Take Vance into custody. Maximum security. He's the mole. She looked out at the frozen wasteland, the ghostly lights dancing overhead. The betrayal cut deeper than any Cathar claw. But it also clarified everything. There was no redemption for Vance. Only consequences. And for the Concordance, only revenge. Gaia's fist would fly, and it would carry not just Earth's wrath, but the weight of every life sold out by a traitor's greed. The final countdown had begun. The Antarctic ice groaned under the weight of Deep Core Station Omega, a cathedral of human desperation carved into the planet's frozen heart. Steam hissed from vents, mingling with the aurora's ethereal glow. Inside the central chamber, a monstrous construct dominated the space, a repurposed geothermal lance, now sleeved in scavenged Cathar, shielding and humming with unstable power. At its tip, contained within a reinforced biocontainment sphere, pulsed the payload, Gaia's fist, a swirling, iridescent mass of engineered Earth life, hyper-aggressive fungal spores, viral vectors keyed to Cathar and Zorathi DNA, predatory nanites designed to consume synthetic polymers, all suspended in a nutrient gel teeming with microscopic death-world horrors. It looked less like a weapon and more like a captured piece of Earth's furious living soul. Anya stood before it, her face illuminated by the sphere's eerie light. She'd overseen the final preparations, her movements precise, her mind a fortress of cold focus. Vance was locked in a cell deep below, guarded by the few she still trusted implicitly. His betrayal was a wound, but it was also fuel. Every calibration check, every power surge stabilized, was a step towards making him and Zorvan pay. Final systems check, she commanded, her voice echoing in the vast chamber. Harmonic resonator charged and stable, reported a young engineer, her face smudged with grease but eyes bright with determination. Targeting solution locked on Helios shipyards. Shield frequency match confirmed. Biocontainment integrity? Anya asked, her gaze fixed on the swirling sphere. Nominal. The payload, it's restless, Commander. Like it knows. It does, Anya thought. It's hungry. Power core, she pressed, drawing from the geothermal tap and every capacitor we could scavenge. We're at 1112% capacity. It's holding, barely. Anya nodded. It was enough. It had to be. Initiate launch sequence. T-minus 10 minutes. A klaxon blared, deep and resonant, shaking the ice. Red lights strobed. The chamber thrummed with building energy, a deep subsonic growl that vibrated in the bones. Anya turned to the small group of engineers and soldiers gathered near the control console. Their faces were grim, resolute. They knew the odds. They knew this was likely a one-way trip for the station itself. The energy discharge would probably melt the ice cap and collapse the chamber. But they also knew what waited if they failed. Remember Theta 7, Anya said, her voice cutting through the din. Remember every city they burned, every child they silenced. Remember the betrayal. She let the word hang heavy with meaning. Today, we don't just fight for survival, we fight for justice. We send Earth's answer to the stars. Make it count. A chorus of grim nods. No cheers. Just the quiet, deadly resolve of those who have nothing left to lose but their chains. Aboard the Sovereign Edict, High Arbiter Zorn felt the first tremor of unease. It wasn't tactical, it was biological. A faint, discordant hum in the ship's life support systems. A strange, earthy smell in the recycled air that his sensitive olfactory stalks couldn't identify. He heezed his stress. The final fleet was assembled. Project Scorched Cradle was hours from deployment. Solzad's chaotic anomaly would be silenced forever. Order would prevail. Then the proximity alarms shrieked. Arbiter, the young Cathar, from before cried, its sensory stalks rigid with panic. Unidentified object. Emerging from Solar System. Trajectory. Direct intercept with Helios shipyards. Velocity. Impossible. It's accelerating through the Oort cloud debris field like it's not there. Zorvan swiveled to the main tactical display. A single tiny blip, radiating immense thermal and biosignatures, was screaming towards the shipyards at a fraction of light speed. It defied physics. It defied logic. Identify. Now. Scans inconclusive. Arbiter. It's organic, but shielded with Cathar alloys? And it's emitting a harmonic frequency, matching our shield resonance. Zorvan's blood ran cold. Resonance. The one theoretical weakness. How? How could the Deathworlders know? Scramble interceptors. Full shield modulation. Destroy that object. Cathar fighters, sleek and deadly, peeled away from the dreadnoughts, unleashing torrents of plasma fire. The object, Gaia's fist, didn't dodge. It simply absorbed the impacts. The Cathar shielding flared, but the bio-payload within seemed to pulse brighter with each hit, as if feeding on the energy. Shields holding, the young Cathar reported, voice tight with disbelief. But the harmonic emission, it's intensifying. It's syncing with our grid. On the display, the blip hit the outer perimeter of the Helios shipyard's multi-layered shield. For a fraction of a second, nothing happened. Then the entire shield grid rippled, like a stone dropped in a pond. A wave of distortion spread outwards from the impact. Alarms blared across the Concordance fleet. Shield harmonic cascade, the young Cathar shrieked. Grid integrity failing. Total collapse in 17 seconds. Zorvan roared in fury, a sound of pure, unadulterated disbelief. Impossible. Activate emergency backups. Divert all power. It was too late. The laws of physics, once bent by human desperation and Deathworld ingenuity, could not be unbent. With a silent, catastrophic failure visible only as a sudden, terrifying absence of energy on the displays, the Helios shipyard's primary shield grid winked out of existence. For 17 free seconds, the colossal shipyard complex was utterly, terrifyingly vulnerable. Gaia's fist, its Cathar shielding now molten slag, slammed into the central command spire of the Helios shipyards. Not with a nuclear blast, but with a sickening, wet thud. The bio-containment sphere shattered. Inside the London bunker, Anya watched the feed from the last surviving deep space probe. She saw the shield collapse. She saw the impact. She held her breath. Then it began. The payload didn't explode. It bloomed, like a grotesque, iridescent flower unfurling in the vacuum. The engineered spores released from containment encountered the shipyard's atmosphere, sterile, controlled, perfect for Cathar and Zorathi life, but utterly defenseless against Earth's hyper-adaptive biosphere. The spores germinated instantly. Vines thick as cables and glowing with internal bioluminescence erupted from the impact crater, lashing out like whips, tearing through durasteel bulkheads. Fungal mats spread with terrifying speed, dissolving circuitry, clogging life support vents, releasing clouds of corrosive spores that ate through Cathar carapaces like acid. The viral vectors found their hosts. Cathar warriors, caught in the initial bloom, convulsed as their internal systems were hijacked. Their own biology turned against them. Zorathi drones, designed for sterile environments, short-circuited as predatory microfauna, swarmed their crystalline joints, consuming lubricants and conductive gels. Velen crystalline structures, normally impervious, began to cloud and fracture as aggressive lichens took root in microscopic imperfections, their growth exerting immense pressure. Chaos erupted. Not the organized chaos of battle, but the primal, consuming chaos of an ecosystem unleashed. The shipyard, a symbol of Concordance order, became a nightmare garden of Earth's vengeance. Alarms wailed but were drowned out by the shrieks of dying aliens and the wet, tearing sounds of the Deathworld flora claiming its territory. On the Sovereign Edict, Zorvan watched in utter horror as his perfect fleet, his instrument of order, was consumed from within. His ship's own life support began to fail, the air thickening with the alien, earthy stench. Vines snaked through ventilation shafts. His crew panicked, their disciplined ranks dissolving into terrified flight as the very walls seemed to come alive against them. "No!" Zorvan roared, slamming a claw against the viewport. "This is not order. This is madness. It is Sol, Arbiter," the young Kuthar whispered, its voice trembling with a terror deeper than death. "It is the Death World fighting back." Deep in the Antarctic ice, the energy discharge from Gaia's Fist's launch reached critical mass. The geothermal tap, pushed far beyond its limits, erupted. Molten rock met ancient ice in a cataclysmic explosion. Deep Core Station Omega and everyone inside was vaporized in an instant, swallowed by the collapsing ice cap and the rising fury of the awakened Earth. Ania didn't see it. She was already gone. In the final moments before the launch, she'd transmitted the probe feed and a final message to every surviving human outpost. Every hidden colony, every fragment of the resistance scattered across the solar system. A message not of victory, but of warning and defiance. They called us Death World vermin. They tried to erase us. They betrayed us from within. But Earth does not forgive. Earth does not forget. We are the storm in the calm, the fire in the ice, the thorn in the side of gods who think they own the stars. Remember Theta 7. Remember the traitor. Remember Helios. And remember this: if they come again, we will be waiting, not with ships, with the planet itself. This is not peace. This is the price of waking the Death World. The transmission ended in static. In the ruins of the London bunker, the survivors watched the probe feed until the signal was lost in the bioplague consuming Helios. They saw the Concordance fleet, once an unstoppable armada, reduced to burning, vine-choked wrecks adrift in a cloud of iridescent spores. They saw the symbol of their oppression turned into a tomb for their oppressors. Silence fell, deeper than the ash-filled air. Then a single voice, young and trembling, broke it. Did we win?" Elias Vance, dragged from his cell to witness the feed, stood shackled in the corner. His face was ashen, his eyes hollow. He saw the destruction he'd helped enable, the genocide he'd facilitated, now turned back upon its architects in the most horrific way imaginable. He saw the faces of Theta 7 reflected in the burning hulks on the screen. The weight of his betrayal, the sheer cosmic irony of his actions leading to this, crushed him. He didn't speak. He just sank to his knees. A broken man finally understanding the true cost of his peace. The young engineer who had reported the payload's restlessness turned to the others, her eyes no longer just determined but alight with a fierce, unbreakable fire. "When?" she echoed, her voice gaining strength. "No. We survived, and we showed them what happens when you try to kill a world that refuses to die." She looked out at the ruined city beyond the bunker entrance, at the ash falling like gray snow. "Now, we rebuild, on our terms." Light years away, in the shattered remains of the Helios shipyards, a single Kunthar escape pod tumbled through the debris field. Inside, High Arbiter Zorvan clung to consciousness. His carapace cracked, his systems failing. The air in the pod was thick with the scent of loam and decay. A single glowing fungal tendril had breached the hull, slowly creeping across the floor towards him. He watched it, not with fear but with a dawning terrible understanding. The Concordance's axiom was shattered. Strength is order. But what was stronger than the ordered might of fleets and empires? The chaotic, relentless, living strength of a world that fought not for conquest, but for its very right to be. The Death World wasn't an anomaly to be corrected. It was a force of nature. And nature, he realized with his last breath as the tendril touched his leg, always wins. The pod drifted. A tiny coffin in a graveyard of giants, carrying the final unheeded warning back to a galaxy that would never be the same. The ghost of Sol was gone. But the Death World lived, and it was watching.